Welcome to Stories of the Enslaved. I'm certain today's narrative, the story of Lydia Moore from Georgia in 1862, will touch your heart profoundly. So, settle in, be still for a moment, and listen closely. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment which city you're listening from. Your engagement helps preserve these histories. Let's begin. Georgia, 1862. For over a year, the war had raged when Lydia Moore first realized her hands could work miracles her life would never permit her to own. She was 10 years old, barefoot, in a dress of flour sacks hanging loose on her undernourished frame. Her fingers were calloused from picking cotton since she was old enough to carry a sack. Her back was already developing the permanent curve that marked her people, her eyes holding shadows no child should bear. Isolated in the red clay hills of central Georgia, Magnolia Creek Plantation sat far enough from the war's main theaters that life continued its brutal routine despite distant cannon thunder. The Vance family had owned the plantation for 3 generations, accumulated through careful marriages and ruthless practices that amassed land and human property in equal measure. Master Harold Vance had died the previous winter, leaving the estate to his widow, Eleanor, and their adult son, Marcus, who promptly enlisted in the Confederate cavalry and rode off to defend Southern honor, leaving his mother to manage 300 acres and 47 enslaved people with only an aging overseer and her own bitter resolve. Eleanor Vance was 42, consumed by disappointments that had curdled into a vinegar sourness poisoning all she touched. She had been pretty once, people said, but years of Georgia sun and unfulfilled ambitions had hardened her features into something sharp and unforgiving. In her youth, she had fancied herself an artist, taking lessons from an itinerant portrait painter in Savannah, filling sketchbooks with competent but uninspired drawings of flowers, buildings, and the occasional stiff portrait. She had dreamed of recognition, of her work in parlors and galleries, of being known as more than a plantation wife. But her work was mediocre, and she knew it, a knowing worse than ignorance. Her paintings were technically adequate but soulless, the kind that earned polite compliments, then were forgotten the moment the viewer turned away. She had married Harold Vance partly because he praised her watercolors effusively, though she suspected even then he praised her dowry, not her talent. After marriage, she painted sporadically, but motherhood and plantation management consumed her time, and her lack of genuine gift consumed her enthusiasm. By Harold's death, Eleanor's easel had gathered dust for 5 years, a monument to dreams withered on the vine. Lydia Moore belonged to Magnolia Creek the way the cotton plants and red clay soil did, considered property, not person, asset, not human, a thing to be bought, sold, worked, and discarded according to the owner's needs and whims. Her mother, Ruth, was the plantation seamstress, skilled with needle and thread, tasked with making and mending clothes for the enslaved community and occasionally for the Vance family when Eleanor didn't want to pay town prices. Her father had been sold when Lydia was 3, traded for a breeding mare and cash to settle a gambling debt. Lydia barely remembered him, except as a feeling of safety that vanished one morning and never returned. Ruth raised her daughter in the desperate way enslaved mothers did, trying to keep her safe while knowing safety was an illusion that could shatter any moment the white folks decided otherwise. She taught Lydia to be invisible, to keep her eyes down, to speak only when spoken to endure without complaint because complaint meant the whip or worse. She taught her songs with coded messages of resistance and hope, about the drinking gourd in the sky pointing north toward freedom, to believe that somehow, someday, things might be different, though neither could imagine how. What Ruth couldn't teach, control, or suppress was the gift manifesting in Lydia's hands almost as soon as she could hold a stick. The child drew constantly, compulsively, with whatever she could find. She drew in the dust of the cabin floor with her finger, creating images so precise and detailed other enslaved people would stop to stare. She drew on the cotton barn walls with charcoal from the fire, sketching mules, chickens, and other slaves with an accuracy seeming impossible for someone so young without formal instruction. She collected blackberry juice in a stolen tin cup, using it as paint on cloth scraps with a brush made from her hair tied to a stick. She would study a face, tree, or bird with an intensity making her seem absent from her body, her eyes cataloging every detail, her mind translating what she saw into marks capturing not just appearance but essence. When she drew her mother's face on bark with a nail, Ruth wept, seeing herself truly reflected there, her exhaustion, love, and sorrow rendered with a tenderness transcending crude materials. The other enslaved people recognized Lydia's gift as extraordinary and slightly frightening, a manifestation of power in a powerless person, a flowering of beauty in a place designed to crush all beauty not serving white interests. Old Isaiah, who claimed to remember Africa though most doubted it, said Lydia carried the spirit of the ancestors, that she had been marked by forces older than slavery, that her hands were instruments of something white folks couldn't own, no matter what papers said. Ruth was equally proud and terrified of her daughter's gift, because anything making you special also made you vulnerable, visible, a target. Lydia drew because she couldn't not draw. Something inside demanded expression regardless of circumstances. Art was her only language for feelings too large and complex for a 10-year-old to otherwise articulate. She drew the cotton fields but gave the plants faces screaming silently. She drew the plantation house as a beautiful monster, all graceful columns and predatory angles. She drew her own hands covered in invisible chains. She drew freedom as a bird flying toward a sun she'd only seen in dreams. For months, Lydia's art remained contained in the enslaved quarters, hidden from white eyes, a secret kept by people understanding anything precious must be protected from those who would steal or destroy it. But plantation secrets were fragile, sustained by collective will yet vulnerable to accident. The accident came in late summer when Lydia was sent to the main house to help her mother with mending, carrying a basket of torn linens. While her mother worked in the sewing room, Lydia waited in the hallway, bored and restless. She found a piece of charcoal fallen from a scuttle near a fireplace, found a clean section of wall hidden behind a tall cabinet, and in the 15 minutes alone, she drew. Without thinking, her hands moving automatically, she created the image of a dead bird she'd seen that morning beneath the magnolia tree, a small brown sparrow, wings spread, eyes empty, beautiful and terrible in its absolute stillness. Eleanor Vance discovered the drawing when she moved the cabinet later that afternoon, looking for a dropped earring. She stood frozen, staring at the charcoal sketch, her mind struggling to process what she saw. The drawing was magnificent, not good or promising, but magnificent. The technical skill would have been impressive in a trained adult. The emotional resonance, the way the dead bird embodied mortality itself, was the work of profound, mature understanding of beauty and loss. Eleanor's first thought was that someone had sneaked in and created it as a prank or message. Her second, noticing charcoal smudges leading toward the sewing room, was that her seamstress Ruth might have hidden artistic talent. Her third, storming into the sewing room and seeing 10-year-old Lydia with charcoal dust on her small fingers, was the thought sealing the child's fate. This enslaved girl could paint, and Eleanor Vance could claim those paintings as her own. The realization hit Eleanor with revelatory force. Here was the answer to all her disappointments, the solution to failed ambitions. She didn't need to develop talent she didn't possess, she just needed to control access to talent already existing. Who would question her? Who would believe an illiterate enslaved child could create art rivaling masters? The very absurdity of the truth would make the lie unassailable. Eleanor sent Ruth away on an errand and closed the sewing room door. She sat across from Lydia, studying the child with new eyes, seeing not a human being, but a resource to exploit, a tool to use, a secret to keep. In a deceptively gentle voice, she asked if the child had made the drawing. Lydia, terrified of punishment, tried to deny it. But Eleanor had seen the charcoal on her fingers, seen her eyes flicker with recognition. When confronted, Eleanor didn't punish Lydia for drawing on the wall. Instead, she did something far crueler. She smiled, a cold stretching of lips never reaching her eyes, and told Lydia she had a special gift, a special job now, that she was lucky because not every slave worked in the big house. She said Lydia would move into the main house basement, into a room set up just for her, where she'd make beautiful pictures helping the plantation and her people. Lydia didn't understand at first, didn't grasp what was being proposed. She just knew something bad was happening, making her stomach hurt and skin feel cold. She asked if her mama could come too. Eleanor's smile grew sharper as she explained no, Ruth would stay in the quarters, but Lydia could see her mother sometimes if she was good and did as told. Then Eleanor explained the rules, and Lydia began understanding the trap closing around her. Lydia would paint pictures, Eleanor would sign, show, and sell them. No one would ever know Lydia painted them. If Lydia told anyone, refused to paint, tried to run away, hurt herself, or otherwise failed, Ruth would be sold to Louisiana sugar plantations. Eleanor described those plantations in detail, her voice pleasant and factual, explaining how slaves died within 5 years from brutal work, disease, and heat, how Ruth would spend her last days cutting cane in swamps full of snakes and mosquitoes, how she'd die far from anyone loving her, buried in an unmarked grave. Lydia was 10. She understood enough to know she had no choice, paint, or her mother would die. That was the bargain, simple, terrible, absolute. That night, Lydia was moved from the cabin shared with her mother to the main house basement. The basement, used for storage, was a damp stone room with a small window near the ceiling letting in a square of light by day, nothing by night. Eleanor had it cleared and furnished with an easel, small table, pile of canvases, and painting supplies from her own abandoned pursuits. There was a thin mattress on the floor, a chamber pot, and an oil lamp giving more smoke than light. There was also a chain attached to a wall bolt, lockable around Lydia's ankle. Eleanor explained the chain was necessary to ensure Lydia didn't wander at night and disturb anyone, almost apologetically, as if a minor inconvenience, not the literal shackling of a child. The chain was long enough to let Lydia reach the easel, table, mattress, and chamber pot, but not the door or window. Long enough to work, not enough to escape. That first night alone, Lydia cried until no tears remained, until her body held only fear and grief. She thought of her mother, the small crowded cabin filled with love, the songs, stories, and embraces making even slavery bearable. She thought of the other children she'd played with, communal meals, whispered conversations, the network of care in the quarters despite everything designed to break it. Now she was alone, truly, completely alone. The basement was cold despite Georgia heat, stone walls absorbing warmth. The darkness when Eleanor took the lamp was absolute, thick, suffocating, full of unidentifiable sounds. She lay on the thin mattress, felt the chain's weight, and understood her life had ended, though she still breathed. The next morning, Eleanor returned with breakfast, a bowl of thin gruel and bread, better than Lydia usually got but barely adequate. She also brought a book of painting reproductions, European masters, open on the table. She pointed to a landscape, a pastoral scene of rolling hills, distant mountains, a river winding through green fields, and told Lydia to copy it. Lydia had never painted before, she'd drawn with charcoal and improvised with berry juice, but never used real paints, oils, brushes, canvas. Eleanor showed basics, mixing colors, loading brushes, applying paint in layers. The instruction was perfunctory, impatient, less like teaching, more like explaining how to operate a machine. Then Eleanor left Lydia alone with canvas, paints, and the expectation genius would manifest on command. For a long time, Lydia just stared at the blank canvas, strange-smelling paints, differently sized brushes. Her hand shook picking up a brush. The paint felt wrong, too thick, slippery compared to charcoal and berry juice. Her first strokes were tentative, clumsy, creating muddy colors bearing no resemblance to the painting to copy. But Lydia had the gift, and the gift didn't care about circumstances, materials, or the broken heart containing it. Within an hour, her hands found rhythm. Within 2, she began understanding how oils behaved differently but followed similar principles. Within 3, the landscape took shape, becoming clear Lydia could not only copy but improve it, adding depth and emotion the original lacked. By evening, when Eleanor returned, the painting was finished. Eleanor stood before it a full minute without speaking, face cycling through expressions Lydia couldn't read, surprise, satisfaction, something like greed, something else almost like rage. Finally, she said the work was acceptable. Tomorrow Lydia would begin a portrait. She should eat and sleep because more work lay ahead. The routine established with brutal efficiency. Each morning, Eleanor brought food and gave assignments, a landscape to copy, a portrait from a photograph, a still life. Each evening, she collected finished work and gave next instructions. Days blurred, distinguished only by which painting Lydia worked on, which colors she mixed, which techniques she taught herself through trial and error. The isolation was worse than work. Lydia existed in a liminal space, neither in house nor quarters, neither slave nor artisan, neither child nor adult. She was a secret, a ghost, a tool producing valuable art, otherwise irrelevant. She saw her mother once a week, visits Eleanor allowed as reward for good work, denied as punishment for resistance. Those visits were torture of a different kind, 15 minutes of desperate embracing, whispered assurances, Ruth pretending everything would be all right while her eyes showed she knew it wouldn't, Lydia trying to be brave while her soul screamed for rescue never coming. The basement became Lydia's entire world. She learned its dimensions by heart, every crack in stone walls, every damp smell variation, every position where the small window let in most light. She learned to paint by lamplight when Eleanor demanded quick work, to ignore headaches from oil fumes and smoke, to function on inadequate food, sleep, and complete absence of joy. She painted landscapes never hers, mountains never climbed, oceans never seen. She painted portraits of white people from photographs Eleanor brought, wealthy planters, wives, children, smiling with confidence of those never doubting their right to exist. Lydia captured likenesses with precision but couldn't help adding something to their eyes, a hint of cruelty in men, a shadow of complicity in women, disturbing emptiness in children. Eleanor never seemed to notice these subtle rebellions, or didn't care because technical quality was so high any emotional ambiguity could be dismissed as artistic interpretation. After 3 months, Eleanor began showing Lydia's work to select visitors, claiming paintings as her own. She told elaborate stories of artistic awakening after her husband's death, how grief unlocked her creative spirit, how she painted in frenzies of inspiration leaving her exhausted but fulfilled. Visitors believed her, they had no reason not to, paintings existed, Eleanor possessed them, the alternative explanation unthinkable. A Charleston art dealer saw a landscape and offered to show Eleanor's work in his gallery. Eleanor accepted. Within weeks, paintings Lydia created in a basement prison sold to wealthy Confederates for prices making Eleanor's eyes gleam. The money funded Confederate uniforms and supplies, supporting the very system keeping Lydia in chains, transforming her gift into fuel for her own oppression's machinery. Eleanor became more demanding, more paintings, faster production, higher quality. She brought increasingly complex assignments, testing Lydia's limits. She also grew paranoid about the secret being discovered, about Lydia communicating truth to someone who might believe. Visits with Ruth became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Eleanor said Ruth was reassigned to fieldwork, too busy to visit, but Lydia suspected Eleanor was cutting her last human connection. The isolation deepened beyond loneliness. Lydia began feeling herself disappearing, her sense of self eroding under relentless pressure of being nothing but painting hands, a tool creating art for others to claim. She stopped dreaming, or didn't remember. She stopped thinking of escape, rescue, any future beyond the next painting. She existed in an eternal present of mixing colors, applying brushstrokes, creating beauty meaning nothing because stolen the moment finished. 6 months into imprisonment, as winter settled over Georgia and the basement grew so cold Lydia's fingers sometimes went numb painting, Eleanor made a new demand crossing a line Lydia hadn't known still existed. She brought a description and rough sketches of a scene to paint, enslaved people working a cotton field, but happy, smiling, singing, content in bondage, propaganda painting justifying slavery as benevolent, where Negroes were protected, provided for, naturally suited to station. Eleanor explained a prominent Confederate official commissioned it. It would hang in a Richmond government building, helping the Southern cause by showing the world the truth about the peculiar institution. She said truth without irony, without acknowledging she demanded Lydia use her gift to create a lie, betray her people, paint chains as flower garlands. Lydia refused, the first time since imprisonment began. She said she couldn't paint it. Eleanor could beat, starve, or sell her mother, but she wouldn't use her hands for that obscenity. The words came stronger than she felt, fueled by rage building for months, rage at Eleanor, the world, God, herself for being powerless. Eleanor's response was measured, terrible. She didn't shout or hit. She simply left the basement, locked the door, and didn't return for 3 days. No food, water, light except the small window showing day turning to night turning to day. Lydia survived licking condensation from stone walls, ignoring hunger consuming her from inside. She survived, barely. When Eleanor finally returned with food, water, and that cold smile, Lydia understood she would paint the propaganda piece because the alternative was death. She painted enslaved people picking cotton with smiles. She painted a son warm and gentle, not brutal. She painted an overseer paternal, not threatening. She painted a lie so convincing viewers would nod, feel comfortable in prejudices, point to it as proof slavery was natural, right, kind. While painting, Lydia cried. Tears fell onto her palette, mixing with colors, diluting them. She kept adding more paint to compensate. She cried and painted, creating a propaganda masterpiece outliving her, carrying poison into the future. When finished, Eleanor praised it effusively, called it Lydia's best yet, genuinely pleased with technical quality and subject. That night, Lydia felt something break inside, not will to survive, too deep an animal to break, but something harder to name. Her sense she was still human, still someone, not something. She lay on the thin mattress, stared into darkness, felt herself hollowing, her spirit excavated by forces she couldn't fight, the gift once joy becoming an instrument of torture. Winter deepened, Lydia's health declined. The basement's damp cold, inadequate food, toxic oil fumes, absolute lack of sunlight and fresh air accumulated in her small body like poison. She developed an unending cough, lost unaffordable weight, moved through days in an exhaustion fog making thinking difficult. But still she painted. Stopping meant unbearable consequences. Her mother's life hung in balance, the machine claiming her wouldn't release until consuming everything she had to give. Eleanor noticed the decline only in terms of productivity. She brought better food occasionally, added a thin blanket, installed a small stove doing little against pervasive cold, improvements purely practical, investments maintaining a valuable tool, containing no compassion or recognition of Lydia's humanity. Spring arrived outside, bringing warmth and new life to a world Lydia only glimpsed through her small window. Her second year of imprisonment began. She was 11 now, though birthdays meant nothing in the basement, where time was measured in paintings completed and days survived. Eleanor's artistic reputation had grown considerably. She was invited to show work in Atlanta and Savannah, received commissions from wealthy families across Georgia and South Carolina, written about in newspapers as a bright light in Southern culture, a reminder civilization flourished even during wartime. Every word of praise belonged to Lydia. Every painting in parlors, galleries, government buildings was created by her hands, torn from her soul, costing pieces of herself never recovered. The injustice was so vast Lydia couldn't hold it all at once, only feel in fragments, glimpses of rage and sorrow flaring up, then suppressed because rage and sorrow didn't mix colors or apply brushstrokes. In late spring, Eleanor received her most prestigious commission yet, a series of 6 paintings depicting Southern life and virtue, gifts for Confederate generals. Large, complex, ambitious. Eleanor was excited in a way Lydia had never seen, already planning how it would cement her reputation, how she'd be remembered as a great Confederate artist. She explained requirements: 2 landscapes showing Southern beauty, 2 portraits of idealized Southern families, 2 genre paintings of daily plantation life, same propaganda, more sophisticated, subtle, for educated tastes. Eleanor brought reference materials, photographs, sketches, descriptions, gave Lydia a 3-month deadline. Too much, even for Lydia's gift. 6 major paintings in 3 months would be challenging under ideal circumstances, in the basement, with inadequate light and declining health, nearly impossible. But impossible didn't matter, refusal meant consequences Lydia had learned not to risk. So she began, painting 12 to 14 hours daily, falling asleep at the easel, waking with brush marks on her face, stiffness in every muscle. Paintings emerged slowly, each taking pieces Lydia didn't have to spare. She painted plantation houses like palaces, not prisons, white children playing while enslaved children watched from background, smiling as if enjoying exclusion, masters and mistresses looking wise, benevolent, a world never existing except in fantasies of people needing to believe cruelty was kindness. With each painting, Lydia disappeared a little more. The winter cough became constant, racking her frame, sometimes bringing blood. Her hands developed tremors making fine detail difficult. Her eyes, strained from years of close work in poor light, blurred, ached. She was dying slowly, certainly, consumed by the gift Eleanor harvested like cotton. 2 months into the commission, Lydia began the final painting, a landscape showing a cotton field at sunset, golden light, pastoral beauty. Eleanor gave extensive notes on composition, lighting, mood. But when Lydia looked at the blank canvas, something shifted inside, a spark of rebellion, a flash of her pre-basement self, a refusal to disappear completely without leaving some truth mark. She painted the landscape as specified, sunset, cotton field, distant trees. But in foreground shadows, where casual viewers might not look closely, where painting would reveal itself only to those truly examining, Lydia painted herself, a self-portrait hidden in darkness, her face emerging from shadows with eyes staring directly at viewer. She painted her exhaustion, sorrow, rage, humanity, herself as witness, victim, creator, prisoner, truth hiding beneath lie. She painted herself knowing Eleanor wouldn't notice, wouldn't understand significance if she did, wouldn't recognize Lydia created a secret message in art's language someday understood by someone with eyes to see. The painting finished early August. All 6 works packed carefully, sent to destination. Eleanor glowed with satisfaction at completing such a prestigious commission. Lydia lay on her mattress, coughed blood into a rag, felt death approaching like a slow tide, inevitable, almost welcome. She was 12, had created art surviving generations, art admired, studied, carrying her soul in every brushstroke. But no one would ever know. No one would see her name beside her work. No one would know she existed, suffered, gave everything, then was asked for more. In basement darkness, Lydia Moore closed her eyes, wondered if disappearing completely might be a kind of freedom. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures providing no relief to basement damp chill. Lydia's 12th year marked by gradual deterioration she barely noticed, like a painting left too long in sunlight, colors leaching imperceptibly until one day the image is half gone. The cough became constant companion, rattling presence in chest worse at night, keeping her from sleep her exhausted body desperately needed. Her fingers, once moving with fluid confidence, now trembled, stiffened, requiring willpower to control each stroke. Eleanor noticed decline affecting quality and speed. Paintings were still extraordinary, Lydia's gift too fundamental for complete erosion by illness, but took longer, occasionally had mistakes needing correction, small imperfections the old Lydia would never have made. These imperfections enraged Eleanor in ways Lydia's suffering did not. They threatened the illusion of Eleanor's genius, threatened reputation built on stolen talent. Punishments grew more frequent, creative. Eleanor withheld food for days, reasoning hunger sharpened focus, removed the thin blanket on cold nights, believing discomfort motivated faster work, installed a basement bell rung at random hours, disrupting Lydia's little sleep, keeping her in constant exhaustion, making resistance impossible, obedience automatic. But cruelest punishment was complete severing of contact with Ruth. Lydia hadn't seen her mother in 4 months, hadn't heard her voice, felt her embrace. Eleanor claimed Ruth was still on the plantation, alive, well, safe as long as Lydia kept painting. But Lydia had no way to verify. For all she knew, her mother was sold, dead, or consumed by grief. Uncertainty was its own torture, constant anxiety gnawing Lydia's mind while her body weakened. Late September, Eleanor received a letter from a prominent Savannah collector who'd bought 3 paintings, wanted to commission a major work, a large-scale historical painting depicting Georgia's founding, with multiple figures, elaborate detail. Substantial payment, promise of prominent display in a new museum celebrating Confederate history, Southern heritage. Eleanor accepted immediately, seeing it as pinnacle of fraudulent career, work cementing her legacy as a great Southern artist. She brought commission details to Lydia with barely contained excitement, laying out sketches, descriptions, historical references. Painting needed to be 6 feet wide, 4 tall, include at least 20 figures in period costume, show ships, buildings, landscape, tell a story of colonial glory, manifest destiny. Most ambitious project Eleanor ever demanded, she gave Lydia 4 months. Lydia looked at specially prepared blank canvas, mountain of preparatory work, Eleanor's gleaming eyes seeing only opportunity, reputation, money, never the dying child who'd have to create this masterpiece chained in a basement. Something inside, some last reserve of will sustaining her through 2.5 years imprisonment, simply gave up. She told Eleanor she couldn't do it, too sick, hands didn't work right, painting beyond her capacity. Eleanor's face transformed from excitement to fury instantly. She grabbed Lydia's chin, fingers digging into hollow cheeks, forcing eye contact. Said Lydia would complete it because alternative was unthinkable, Ruth's life hung in balance, Lydia existed only to create art Eleanor could claim. Said if Lydia failed, refused, died before completing, Eleanor would ensure Ruth suffered for defiance, punishment creative, prolonged, devastating. The threat worked, always worked, because Eleanor had identified the one leverage controlling Lydia no matter how broken. Lydia nodded submission. Eleanor released her chin, leaving fingerprint bruises fading long before emotional damage. Eleanor left in a swirl of skirts, satisfaction. Lydia turned to enormous blank canvas consuming her last strength, probably her life. Preparatory work began next day, detailed sketches mapping composition, figure placement, perspective, lighting. Even weakened, with trembling hands, blurred vision, Lydia's fundamental art understanding remained intact. She knew instinctively how to balance composition, guide viewer's eye, create depth, movement, narrative in static image. The gift, her curse, still functioned, producing miracles as vessel crumbled. Actual painting began early October, quickly became prolonged dying. Lydia worked on until lamp oil ran out, standing at easel until legs gave out, then sitting, mixing colors until fingers bled from cold, chemicals, applying paint with brushes growing heavier daily. Historical scene took shape slowly, ships arriving, colonists settling, Native Americans watching from Treeline, all rendered with meticulous period detail, historical accuracy. Eleanor provided extensive research, but Lydia added touches transforming painting from illustration to something more complex, troubling. Colonists' faces showed determination but also greed, land and power hunger barely concealed beneath civilized veneers. Native Americans' expressions held knowledge of what was coming, prescient sorrow making static poses dynamic with unspoken tragedy. Sky Lydia painted was beautiful but ominous, suggesting founding moments celebrated contained seeds of future violence, injustice. These subtleties weren't conscious choices, Lydia too exhausted for conscious artistry. She painted what her hands knew, what her gift demanded. Truth bled through despite Eleanor's specifications, despite propaganda purpose. Truth asserted itself in Lydia's work, in shadows, expressions, compositional choices revealing more than surface appearances suggested. By November, painting half finished, Lydia dying. No question, no pretending illness temporary or youth, resilience would pull through. Body pushed beyond limits too long, deprived of sunlight, fresh air, adequate nutrition, human connection, hope. The bonanza, consuming enslaved people who lost will to live, taken root in Lydia's spirit, finishing what malnutrition, toxic fumes, exhaustion started. Cough constant now, racking spasms leaving her gasping, weak, bringing blood quantities frightening even her. Appetite disappeared completely, food tasted like ash, sat heavy, most days she ate only because Eleanor forced her, standing over her, threatening until Lydia choked down enough for another day's work. Weight dropped so dramatically chain kept slipping off, requiring Eleanor tighten it, adjustment leaving raw sores where metal rubbed skin stretched tight over bone. Vision failing too, not just from strain of close work in poor light, but deeper deterioration making world increasingly dim, blurred. She worked closer to canvas to see details, mixed colors by feel, trusted muscle memory, instinct to compensate for eyes no longer reliable. Some days basement darkened even with lamp burning, as if consciousness flickered, faded, preparing for extinction. Eleanor saw all this, cared only as threat to commission completion. She brought a doctor once, nervous man taking one look at chained child in basement, clearly wanting no part of moral compromise asked. He listened to chest, looked at eyes, checked pulse, told Eleanor with discomfort girl severely ill, needed rest, proper food, fresh air, sunlight, without significant changes, would likely die within months. Eleanor dismissed concerns with practiced ease, said girl prone to exaggeration, well cared for, surely medicine could address symptoms without dramatic lifestyle changes. Doctor prescribed tonics, cough suppressants, accepted payment, left with visible relief, choosing to believe Eleanor's reassurances rather than confront obvious truth. Easier that way, always was. Tonics did nothing. Lydia deteriorated, painting grew. Two processes inversely related, canvas filling with life, color, historical pageantry, artist emptying, becoming shell, ghost, fading presence barely tethered to existence. Early December, Lydia worked in haze of fever, delirium, no longer certain what real, what hallucination. Sometimes saw mother in basement corner, smiling, singing old songs. Sometimes saw shadow, wolf from William Robinson's story whispered in quarters years ago, ghost animal keeping vigil over another dying child. Sometimes saw angels, demons, nothing, just darkness pressing. But hands kept working. Even when mind wandered, couldn't remember where, why painting, hands remembered, mixed colors, loaded brushes, applied paint with accumulated skill of years' forced practice. The gift, her curse, remained faithful to end, producing beauty as vessel approached total failure. Eleanor grew increasingly anxious as Lydia worsened, deadline approached. Promised painting by Christmas, already spent part of commission, told collector work proceeding magnificently. Couldn't afford Lydia dying before completion, embarrassment, financial loss, fraud exposure through tool breaking before job done. Tried strategies to keep Lydia alive, working. Brought better food Lydia couldn't eat, adjusted schedule allowing more rest Lydia couldn't take because nightmares, pain made sleep impossible, brought small heater doing nothing against damp cold seeped into bones. Even, in panic finding Lydia unconscious at easel, brought Ruth to visit, thinking maternal presence might revive dying girl. Visit brief, devastating. Ruth hadn't seen daughter in 6 months, didn't know extent of decline, hadn't fully understood what done to Lydia in Eleanor's basement. Seeing skeletal child chained to wall, blood-stained rags, hollow eyes, paintings surrounding like beautiful accusations, Ruth's scream echoed through house with raw anguish. Even Eleanor looked uncomfortable. Ruth held Lydia, wept, begged Eleanor to stop, let child rest, show mercy, remember this human being, child, someone's daughter. Offered to take Lydia's place, work twice as hard, do anything if Eleanor would let Lydia go. Eleanor listened with mild annoyance if someone asked to make irrational business decision. Explained Lydia had job to finish, work nearly complete, afterward time for rest, recovery. Said as if believed it, as if obvious reality of Lydia's imminent death invisible, as if wishful thinking could override physical collapse. Visit ended with Ruth dragged away, still weeping. Lydia returned to work, tears streaming, painting through blurred vision, adding grief to image of colonial founding becoming final masterpiece. She painted ships like coffins, colonists with blank righteousness of those causing suffering without acknowledgement, sky suggesting judgment deferred but not forgotten. Painted own death into celebration of beginning, encoded suffering into glory myth, created palimpsest where truth showed through lies for eyes willing to see. Painting completed 3 days before Christmas. Lydia applied final brushstrokes in near-complete dissociation, body moving automatically, consciousness floating distant, disconnected. Setting down brush last time, felt no triumph, relief, satisfaction, just vast emptiness, bone-deep exhaustion suggesting body waited for permission to stop fighting. Eleanor came to collect finished painting, found it better than hoped, technically flawless, historically detailed, compositionally brilliant, exactly work cementing reputation as major artist. Praised Lydia effusively, called work magnificent, promised now Lydia could rest, recover. Said cheerfully, apparently oblivious Lydia barely conscious, breathing shallow, labored, death obviously approaching. Painting taken away to be framed, delivered. Eleanor left basement in high spirits, already composing story of creative process, struggles, inspirations, personal meaning work held. Locked door behind. Lydia alone again with chains, dying body, toxic fumes lingering from months of oil paint. Lydia lasted 3 more days, increasing confusion, decreasing consciousness, fever dreams blending memory, fantasy, pain moved beyond acute suffering into numb inevitability. Drifted between sleep, waking without distinction, saw visions of mother, father, old Isaiah, shadow, angels with faces like paintings she'd created. Felt chain but couldn't remember why, felt cold but couldn't remember ever warm, felt body shutting down system by system, becoming less substantial, boundary between existing and not existing increasingly porous. 3rd day, December 28, 1862, Lydia Moore stopped breathing. No drama, final words, gestures, clarity, peace. Simply slipped from labored breathing to none, barely alive to definitively dead, body giving up struggle without fanfare, witness. Died alone in basement, chained to wall, surrounded by paint fumes, darkness. 12 years old, used up completely. Eleanor found body next morning bringing breakfast, discussing next commission. Stood doorway long moment, staring at small corpse on mattress, expression cycling surprise, annoyance, calculation. No grief, remorse, acknowledgement she'd killed child as surely as gun to head. Only practical considerations, disposal, maintaining appearances. Had 2 enslaved men remove body after dark, wrapped in thin blanket Lydia used for warmth. Buried far corner of plantation, section for slaves dying without family, grave without marker, ceremony. Ruth not told 2 days, not allowed see body, no opportunity goodbye, grieving, basic human dignity acknowledging daughter's death. When learned, wail of anguish echoed across plantation, sound so profound in sorrow even hardest overseers looked away, briefly ashamed. Eleanor went into public mourning, not for Lydia. Mourned lost inspiration, mysterious force enabling artistic flowering, now inexplicably departed. Told visitors war grief finally caught her, sorrow of son dying in battle, Marcus killed at Antietam, news reached 2 weeks before Lydia's death, dried creativity wellspring sustaining work. Accepted condolences, support, played bereaved mother, blocked artist with convincing sincerity, quietly planned retirement from public artistic life. Had enough completed paintings maintain reputation, substantial proceeds years of commissions, sales, historical painting legacy already hanging Savannah Museum, praised as masterwork of Southern art. Could afford step back, be remembered for artistic burst defining middle years, live comfortably on reputation Lydia created, paid for with life. War continued 2.5 years, ended Confederate defeat, slavery society collapse. Magnolia Creek Plantation burned during Sherman's march to sea, main house reduced blackened timbers, rubble, fields left reverting wilderness, enslaved people scattered, seeking family sold away, heading north toward promised freedom, trying build lives from bondage ashes. Ruth survived war, never recovered Lydia's death. Lived another 15 years, washerwoman in Savannah, always searching information about daughter, hoping confirmation, closure never came. Died 1877, never knowing full extent Lydia endured, never knowing daughter's art survived, celebrated, never knowing Lydia's final rebellion, hidden self-portrait in shadows, still waiting discovered. Eleanor Vance lived to 73, died 1893 natural causes, comfortable circumstances. Obituary remembered talented artist whose brief brilliant career produced works lasting value, pillar of community, woman maintaining dignity, grace through personal tragedy, societal upheaval. Mentioned late husband, son died war. Did not mention Lydia Moore. Painting survived, art's terrible power, irony. Outlasted creators, creation circumstances, memory, truth, justice. Lydia's work, signed Eleanor's name, past generations of owners, private collections to museums, studied, analyzed, praised critics marveling technical skill, emotional depth, wondering mysterious period intense productivity followed artistic silence. 6 major commission paintings scattered different institutions. Historical painting Georgia's founding became Savannah Museum permanent collection centerpiece, displayed prominently, educational materials, reproduced textbooks. Propaganda painting happy enslaved people cotton fields purchased private collector, eventually donated Southern Heritage Society, used decades support benevolent slavery mythology. Landscape with Lydia's hidden self-portrait went Charleston Museum, hung over century before anyone looked closely enough see shadows hiding. Discovery came 1968, graduate student researching Southern art examining paintings attributed Eleanor Vance noticed strange shadows cotton field landscape. Using magnification, careful observation, identified face emerging darkness foreground, black child's face, haunting sorrowful eyes staring directly viewer. Discovery puzzling, Eleanor never included such elements other work, face stylistically different, emotional content contradicted pastoral beauty. Graduate student, young black woman Dr. Catherine Mitchell, investigated further. Examined other paintings attributed Eleanor, looking anomalies, studying technique, style inconsistencies. Researched Eleanor's biography, artistic training, development. Found records commissions, sales, documentation Eleanor's sudden productivity early 1860s, followed sudden retirement. More investigated, less official story made sense. Dr. Mitchell's research led plantation records, bills of sale, property inventories, fragmentary documentation lives considered insignificant record detail. Found Ruth Moore's name Magnolia Creek records, mentioned daughter Lydia, gap both names disappeared plantation ledgers late 1862. Found Eleanor's household account same period. Unexplained artist supply purchases quantities far exceeding one painter's needs. Payments doctors. References unnamed illness. Interviewed descendants people enslaved Magnolia Creek. Old men. Women remembering stories grandparents told. Girl taken big house never came back. Paintings appearing suddenly magic. Mother's grief never healed. Stories fragmentary, sometimes contradictory, distorted time, trauma, oral history unreliability, but pointed consistently same conclusion. Eleanor Vance not created paintings attributed, someone else had, name, existence deliberately erased. Dr. Mitchell published findings 1972 paper, The Invisible Artist, Evidence of Enslaved Labor in Southern Art Production. Controversial, widely dismissed art establishment with significant financial, reputational, institutional investments maintaining authentication works attributed Eleanor Vance. Critics argued evidence circumstantial, face shadows artistic fancy, no definitive proof connecting Lydia Moore paintings. Debate continued years, some scholars supporting Dr. Mitchell, others defending Eleanor's authorship. Museums reluctant revise attributions without incontrovertible proof, difficult obtain work created century earlier under circumstances specifically designed conceal truth. Paintings remained attributed Eleanor Vance most institutional records, occasional footnotes mentioning disputed authorship. But Dr. Mitchell's work planted seed growing slowly subsequent decades as art history grappled attribution, authenticity questions, institutions began acknowledging roles perpetuating historical injustices, technologies improved analyzing paintings, detecting multiple hands, hidden elements. Lydia Moore case gained renewed attention. 2019, advanced imaging technology examined paintings thoroughly, X-ray fluorescence, infrared reflectography, other techniques revealed layers invisible casual observation. Evidence compositional changes, stylistic variations suggesting multiple artistic hands, significant technique evolution short periods. Several paintings small anomalies, faces shadows, figures barely visible beneath later paint, elements telling different story surface image suggested. Most significantly, 5 different paintings small, carefully hidden marks appearing initials LM worked shadows, background details invisible unless new look. 5 paintings, 5 signatures, 5 quiet rebellions against erasure, 5 attempts dying child leave evidence existed, created, mattered. Art world responded slowly, reluctantly, institutions always do confronting uncomfortable truths collections. Some museums revised attributions, attributed to Eleanor Vance, disputed, Eleanor Vance possibly with studio assistance. Few, particularly commitments acknowledging historical injustices, further reattributed, unknown enslaved artist, possibly Lydia Moore, attributed to Eleanor Vance. But most institutions, even acknowledging possibility, probability Lydia's authorship, maintained Eleanor's name primary attribution, cited uncertainty extent Lydia's contribution, impossibility definitively proving authorship after time, precedent attribution changes required incontrovertible evidence. Behind scholarly justifications, practical considerations, collections valued millions, donor relationships built existing attributions, educational materials, catalogs needing revision, institutional inertia making change difficult even when right. So Lydia Moore remains largely invisible 2025, over 160 years after death. Some scholars no name, argue recognition work, some museums acknowledge small text wall labels attribution disputed, some activists protest institutions continuing display work under Eleanor Vance's name. But vast majority museum, gallery visitors across South, paintings still work Eleanor Vance, talented Southern artist whose brief brilliant career produced masterpieces moving, inspiring viewers generations later. Paintings themselves remain magnificent, time not diminished technical skill, emotional power. Landscapes draw viewers into carefully composed depths, portraits capture something essential subjects transcending physical likeness, historical painting Georgia's founding commands attention scale, detail, narrative complexity, propaganda painting enslaved people cotton fields serves evidence, not evidence Eleanor intended, of how art weaponized support injustice. And Charleston Museum, landscape hidden self-portrait hangs prominent position, viewed thousands yearly. Most never look closely foreground shadows, never notice face hidden, never see Lydia Moore staring across century half, eyes asking seen, acknowledged, remembered. Occasionally, someone pauses, looks closely, drawn something can't articulate, since painting contains more surface beauty suggests. Lean, pure shadows. Sometimes, light right, paying attention, see her, black child's face, emaciated, sorrowful, eyes holding accusation, plea. See her, feel unsettled, feel wrong even if can't immediately identify what. Most move on without investigating further, without reading wall text small print disputed attribution, without connecting face shadows story theft, abuse, murder painting contains. Move next painting, gallery, experience. Lydia Moore returns invisibility, shadow hidden shadows, ghost someone else's painting, story world chosen not here. But she's there. Always there, hidden work created, waiting found, waiting day world finally ready see refusing acknowledge, genius, suffering coexist, beauty emerges brutality, humanity persists circumstances designed destroy, art created enslaved hands belongs those hands, not masters claimed. Lydia Moore died 12 years old, used up, discarded, buried unmarked grave, name erased work created. But gift survived, truth survived, face shadows survived. Perhaps own immortality, own justice, incomplete, delayed, inadequate, but present nonetheless. Charleston Museum basement storage rooms not public, curators preserved historical record fragments related Eleanor Vance disputed works, Eleanor's personal papers, letters, diaries, household accounts, Magnolia Creek plantation records, bills sale, property inventories, newspaper clippings Eleanor's career, scholarly articles arguing attribution. Dr. Catherine Mitchell's original research notes donated museum after 2003 death. One other item found 2015 renovations building once slave quarters near Magnolia Creek site. Archaeologists excavating found buried cabin floor corner small bundle wrapped oilcloth. Inside, several cloth pieces painted berry juice, crude paintings child's hand showing faces, birds, plantation scenes. Beneath paintings, scrap paper probably torn ledger book, words careful uncertain letters, my name is Lydia Moore. I made these pictures. I am real. Bundle preserved acid-free containers climate-controlled storage, catalogued, documented, occasionally researchers examine. Not display, exhibition, public knows exists. Another artifact storage, evidence waiting day story tells becomes impossible ignore, when institutions, individuals finally decide truth matters more tradition, justice delayed 160 years worth pursuing even now, 12-year-old enslaved girl painted masterpieces basement prison deserves name restored work created dying hands. That day may come, or not. But Lydia Moore's paintings survive, face hidden shadow survives, truth survives, waiting patiently wait truth always waits, knowing eventually, inevitably, buried surfaces, hidden reveals, stolen recognized theft always was. Lydia Moore real. Created beauty outlived century. Deserves remembered, honored, name spoken people stand before work feel hearts break little skill, sorrow rendered oil, canvas. Deserves more invisibility, more shadows, deserves stolen, recognition, acknowledgement, simple human dignity existence, achievement acknowledged world enriched suffering. Until acknowledgement comes, waits paintings, shadows, hidden signatures, fragmentary records, stories past generations, conscience anyone willing see history tried hide. Waits, eyes painted shadows stare world refusing see, asking question ask life, ask still death, do you see me? Do you see me?